everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Benchmarks Symposium, a video series about Vodori's 2023 State of Promotional Review Benchmarks Report. I'm Annalise, Senior Manager of Marketing and Communications at Vodori, and today I'm joined by Lindsay McGarrah, one of the Customer Success Managers at Vodori. Lindsay, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks. Hi, as Annalise said, I am Lindsay McGarrah. I am a Customer Success Manager at Vodori, dedicated to our enterprise and large strategic customers. My role is to serve as the success partner to our customers and make sure that they are optimizing the product and achieving their goals in using our suite of products. I work closely with system owners and key stakeholders to ensure a high level of satisfaction and utilization, and I collaborate to offer solutions and best practices. And I'd say overall support them as their advocate and voice on product feedback.
Incredible. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to get your perspective today because we're going to be talking a little bit about best practices. So we just released the benchmarks report, right? We've got this whole new shiny set of data that we certainly use internally with our customers and talking about their process. Where do we sit? Like, where do we need to focus, or what things we want to improve or optimize? And one of the key things that came out of this year's report is this idea that many organizations are having to do more with less. It could be that they're impacted by economic conditions, their teams are smaller, their budgets are different, a combination thereof, right? And so I'm curious to get your perspective because we anticipate that some of this is going to be continuing into 2024. And so create some of this connective tissue for us. We have the data of the benchmarks. What types of best practices would you share either with our customers or just the industry at large to help organizations sort of overcome this challenge of having to do more with less?
Sure. So I would say a consistent pain point and challenge I'm hearing is around this concept of doing more with less and really limited resources. So just like the benchmarks report, if asked, would say use your data. Use the data and the performance metrics to focus on areas of improvement and, of course, celebrate wins too. Many of my customers are creative and strategic around using our premium dashboards, not only to monitor their KPIs and trends over time, but also take a proactive approach. So they will look for efficiencies through data, whether that's possible training opportunities, and that could be training on system features that can be helping them, or even internal processes. Maybe they need to assess and make some improvements to their SOPs. For example, some customers really use due date in the system to hold accountability and prioritize, and they might pull that into their SOPs. Another thing I would say around efficiency is looking at the quality of content coming into the system. So we know that there's a large volume of content that's typically coming and flowing into the system, but really focusing on the quality of that content, I think has been a big takeaway for many of my customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of follow-up questions for you. So you mentioned even just knowing about the data is super important, right? And in our benchmarks report, we introduce things like job duration, review duration. If someone is coming to this maybe for the first time, maybe they are newly an owner of this process or whatever the case may be, what would be the set of metrics that you would recommend people start with? Like what are the critical things to be aware of? And then what would be like the next level of information or detail perhaps that organizations could think about as it relates to their process and
Yeah, it
data?
can be overwhelming when looking at the data because there's so much to look at. So I would say if you're new to KPIs and measuring this type of thing, I would start with, big four ones, average job duration, average review duration. I would look at average circulations, and then I would just look at total volume of content. And I know those are just a big high level metrics. I have found also a newer one that seems to be sparking a lot of interest in creating some opportunities around the time in incorporating feedback. So a lot of times the blame gets forced on the reviewers, which sometimes is the case for sure. But what a lot of customers have also been finding is that there is that onus on the content creators and the initiators. And again, it comes back to that quality of content. the quality that's coming into the system is what you're going to get back in your response from your reviewers. And so a lot of folks are looking at that metric along with first pass approval and number of circulations to derive that level of quality that's coming into the system. So not even just about speed, but again, what's coming in the first place.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things we included in this year's report was sort of those metrics by content subtype. And to
Mm-hmm.
your point, the time it takes to incorporate feedback is a huge component of that
Okay.
story. It might, when you look at our report this year, websites, videos, podcasts are kind of on the higher end of the average job
Mm-hmm.
duration. But then you start to think about it, it's like, well, actually, there's a lot of ways we could look at this, right? And I think that days incorporating feedback is so important to be aware of because that type of content typically does take a
Yes.
while to incorporate feedback. It's just more complex. You've got maybe you're working with an agency. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's a really good point that just looking at the job duration is super helpful, but sort of the slices of time that make up that
Right.
job duration are also really helpful and can illuminate a lot of the intricacies or nuances about someone's process.
Absolutely.
And then relating to high quality content. So what are some things that we talk about with customers as it relates to high quality content? Like what's one way they,
Mm-hmm.
if someone comes to you and says like, hey, this is something we're focusing on. We want to improve the quality of the content. We're even starting in the review process. What would be one thing that you would advise them on?
Yeah. And one thing I hear and some customers do and don't do are hold cross-functional meetings. And this doesn't need to be, a time spent on every piece of content, but to really focus attention on things that are stuck, maybe, or are that level of content that warrant a conversation. And so pulling those people together to collaborate, pull up Pepper Flow in the system, do their homework in advance, and then look at those comments together and talk it out in a meeting. Even doing that pre work, walking into some of those meetings allows a better focused conversation. The right people are in that conversation, and it's just a good use of time. Um, the other thing I've seen that has had a really good outcome, but again, is not always appropriate for every customer, depending on your situation, but is a coordinator or a gatekeeper approach. So, having someone to initially review the content that's coming into the system first, and there might be a checklist of 3 to 5 things that that person is really focused on so that when it gets to the MLR team to review, those approvers can really focus on what's important and their area of expertise. So maybe it's eliminating the need to worry about branding or grammar, or is there supporting documentation that's attached? So again, focusing that review time and those specific SMEs in their role in the process.
I love that. I think that's super helpful. You can imagine by just having some of those things already checked, the reviewer, when they go in, can say, okay,
Hmm.
I know that someone else has looked for, ABC thing. I can really focus on my review purview and the things that I need to be, taking a closer look at. So I think that's extremely
Correct.
helpful. Awesome. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining the video today. Always incredibly helpful to get your perspective and insights on this topic, as you are the one with boots on the ground with our customers and helping them to optimize their process. So thank you so much for joining. And to everyone, please go download the 2023 State of Promotional Review Benchmarks Report. You can download it at vodori.com/2023 benchmarks. And please be sure to follow us on LinkedIn. We are doing a whole series of videos related to the data and insights in the report. So please join in on the conversation. Thanks and have a great day.